On the other side of King Dashrat's kingdom, far, far away, there was a demon king named Ravana, or Ravan. He was a great Rakshas. Rakshas is demon. He was so powerful that he persecuted even the gods in heaven. All the gods, led by Brahma, approached Lord Vishnu. Brahma said, "O Lord, please be kind enough to kill Ravan and protect us." Vishnu smiled and said, "Don't worry. I will take birth as Dashrat's son and kill Ravan." In order to have children, Dashrat performed a great sacrifice and a yagna. He poured ghee on the sacrificial fire where sages chanted the Vedic hymns. When the ritual was about to be over, a celestial being rose from the sacrificial fire. He handed over a bowl to Dashrat, saying, "O Dashrat, the gods are pleased with you and have sent you this heavenly prasad. Give this to your wives, and your wish will be fulfilled." Dashrat had 3 wives. The king received the gift joyfully and distributed the prasad to his 3 wives. In due course, 4 godlike sons were born to him. Ram was the eldest of them. He was born to Kaushalya, the first wife of Dashrat. He was the reincarnation of Lord Vishnu. The other 2 were Bharat, and the other 3 children were Bharat, born to Kaikeyi, his second wife, and the twins Lakshman and Satrughna, born to Sumitra, his third wife. The day of Ram's birth is celebrated now as Ram Navami. The 4 sons of Dashrath grew up tall, handsome, and brave. Sage Vashishtha was their guru. They learned the Vedas from him. They also became adept in hunting, riding, fencing, and archery. The princes now were 15 years old. Dashrath loved all of them dearly, but Ram was dearest to his heart. Ram and Lakshman were inseparable companions. Similarly, Bharat and Shatrughna always remained together. One day, the great sage Vishwamitra came to Ayodhya. Dashrath was overjoyed to have the great Rishi as his guest. He immediately got down from his throne and received him with great respect. Dashrath said, "I am indeed blessed by your visit. Is there anything within my power that I can do for you?" Vishwamitra replied, "O king, I am pleased by your words. Powerful demons are disturbing my yagna, and I want you to send Ram with me to protect my yagna." Dashrath was taken aback by the words of Vishwamitra. How could he think of sending young Ram to face the demons? He said, "O sage, please spare Ram. I shall come with you with my large army and kill the demons. Ram is too young for this task." But Vishwamitra knew better. He insisted on his request being granted. Dashrath agreed to send Ram with Vishwamitra. With the blessing of Dashrath, Ram and Lakshman followed Vishwamitra to the forest. "This is the Dandika Forest." Vishwamitra told the princess, "Here lives a Rakshasi, a female demon, called Tadka. With Marich, she has the strength of 1,000 elephants. She knows charms and spells too. So one dares to enter the forest fearing her. Only you can kill her." At first, Ram hesitated to kill a woman, but he was reminded of his father's instructions to obey Vishwamitra implicitly. So he strung his bow and twanged the string. The sound echoed in the forest, and the wild animals ran helter-skelter in fear. Tadka also heard the sound. She was furious. Who was it that dared to disturb her? Mad with rage and roaring like thunder, she rushed towards Ram. A fierce war between Ram and Tadka followed. She began to throw stones and rocks at Ram. Tadka crashed to the earth. Vishwamitra rejoiced at Ram's great skill and decided to give Ram and Lakshman the divine weapons he had acquired through his austerities. He taught them several mantras, meditating on which divine weapons would be activated for use. Next next morning, Vishwamitra informed Ram that all the sages were going to Mithila, the capital of the famous king Janak, to witness a great sacrifice, or yagna. Ram and Lakshman too accompanied the sages led by Vishwamitra. Janak was a saintly king. Once while he was plowing the land, a lovely baby girl arose from the furrow. He took her home and brought her up as his own daughter and named her Sita, and sometimes she's also known as Janaki, as she's the daughter of the king Janak. Janak had with him a bow given by Lord Shiva. The bow was so heavy that it needed many people to move it. Janak wanted Sita to marry the bravest and the best prince in the country. So he had vowed that he would give Sita in marriage only to the one who could string the great bow of Lord Shiv. Many had tried earlier, but none could move it, let alone string it. Janak was overjoyed to hear about the coming of Vishwamitra. He welcomed the party with great respect. Vishwamitra introduced Ram and Lakshman to Janak and said, "Show the great bow to Ram." Janak agreed doubtfully. The princes are so young and tender. How can they even lift it? He thought. But he said, "If Ram can string the bow, I shall gladly get my daughter married to him." He ordered the bow to be brought in. The bow was kept in a big box mounted on an 8-wheeled chariot. It was pulled by many soldiers into the great hall. Ram then stood up in all humility. With the permission of Janak and Vishwamitra, he opened the box and looked at the bow. Everyone was watching, but none except Vishwamitra believed that Ram would be able to string the bow. Ram then lifted the bow with such ease. Placing one end against his toe, he put forth his might and bent the bow to string it. When lo and behold, the famous bow snapped into two. Dashrat was informed. He gladly gave his consent to the marriage and came to Mithila with his troops. Janak arranged for a grand wedding. Ram married Sita. At the same time, Lakshman married Sita's sister Urmila. Bharat and Satrughna married Sita's cousins Mandavi and Srutkriti. Vishwamitra blessed them all and left for the Himalayas. Dashrat returned to Ayodhya with his sons and his daughter-in-laws. For 12 years, Ram lived happily with Sita in Ayodhya. The people of Ayodhya loved Ram as he shared their joys and sorrows. When King Dashrat saw that Ram had won the hearts of his people, he decided to instill him as the crown prince. Dashrat was getting old and he wanted Ram to take over the reins of the government. Calling his ministries, he told them of his desire and sought their advice. They unanimously welcomed this suggestion. Dashrat then ordered for immediate coronation of Ram. At that time, Bharat and Shatrughna had gone to Kaikeyi to see their maternal grandfather. But there was one woman who grieved to hear about Ram's coronation. It was Manthara. Manthara was Kaikeyi's maid-servant. She resolved to stop the coronation somehow or other. She rushed to Kaikeyi. She was the first to give the news of coronation to Kaikeyi. At first, Kaikeyi was very happy to hear that Ram was to be crowned as the king, as she loved Ram very much. But Manthara poisoned her mind. She said, "Oh, what a fool you are! Are you not able to see the sorrow in store for you? The king had always loved you more than the other queens. But the moment Ram is crowned, Kaushalya will be more powerful and take revenge on you. In fact, you are going to become the slave of Kaushalya." Fear gripped the heart of Kaikeyi. What should she do now? Again, Manthara was there to suggest a plan. She said, "Remember long ago when Dashrat was sorely wounded in a battle with demons? You swiftly drove his chariot to safety and thus saved his life. At that time, he had offered you 2 boons. You said you would ask for these boons later. Now the time has come to demand those boons. Choose the coronation of Bharat as the first boon and the banishment of Ram to the forest for 14 years as the second boon." Thus Manthara poisoned the mind of Kaikeyi. The queen, though noble in heart so long, was trapped by Manthara. Dashrat came to Kaikeyi's apartments to convey personally the glad news of Ram's coronation. Kaikeyi was not in her usual place. When he found her, he was shocked to see her laying on the bare ground with loose hair and all ornaments cast away. He guessed there was something wrong. He gently took her head on his lap and caressing her asked her who had done her wrong. But Kaikeyi did not care for the king's love and concern towards her. Releasing herself free from him, she stood up and said, "You had promised me 2 boons. Please grant them to me now. Let Bharat be crowned as king and Ram be banished from the kingdom for 14 years." Dashrat could hardly believe his ears. Unable to bear what he had heard, he fell down unconscious. Regaining his senses after a while, he looked at Kaikeyi. He was trembling like a deer facing a tiger. He cried out in helpless anger, "What has come over you? What harm has Ram done to you? You know Ram loves you more than his own mother. You also know that I cannot live without Ram. I clasp your feet, change your mind, and ask for some other boons." But Kaikeyi refused to yield. The old king fainted, and whole night passed thus. The next morning, Sumantra, the minister, came to inform Dashrat that all the preparation for Ram's coronations were ready. Dashrat was not in a position to speak, but Kaikeyi ordered Sumantra to call Ram immediately. Ram came and saw that the atmosphere was tense. Dashrat could only say with a voice choked with emotions, "Ram, Ram, my dear Ram." Ram was alarmed. He looked at Kaikeyi and said, "Mother, is father angry with me? Have I offended him in any way? I have never seen him like this before." Kaikeyi said, "He has something unpleasant for you, but he's afraid to say it. Long ago he had offered me 2 boons. Now I demand them." Kaikeyi told him about the boons. "Is that all, mother?" asked Ram with a smile. "Oh, send for Bharat. It does not matter to me in the least whether I am crowned or Bharat, my beloved brother, is crowned. Please take it that your boons are granted. I shall start for the forest today myself." The news that Ram would leave for the forest spread like wildfire. Everyone was shocked. Lakshman said angrily, "But father has been most unjust to you. I will not tolerate this." Saying so, he took up his big bow and started angrily towards Dashrat's palace. Ram placed his hand on his brother's shoulder. With a gentle smile, he said, "For this small kingdom's sake, you want to go against your father's word given to Kaikeyi?" Tears flowed from Lakshman's eyes. He said, "If you must go to the forest, then take me also with you." Ram agreed. Ram went to Sita to break the news. He said, "Look after Mother Kaushalya in my absence." She replied, "Please don't leave me behind. I shall die without you." With eyes filled with tears, at last Ram permitted her to follow him. The city was plunged in gloom. Women and children and even men and elders wept at the thought of parting from Ram. Ram, Sita, and Lakshman sat in the chariot, dressed like hermits. The people of Ayodhya ran behind the chariot, crying loudly. Sumantra drove the chariot as fast as he could. They reached the bank of the river called Tamsa. The people of Ayodhya followed them. Ram decided to spend the night there. Early morning, he woke up and told Sumantra, "The citizens who have followed us are fast asleep. It is not good that they follow me. Let us start before they wake up." Ram, Lakshman, and Sita, driven by Sumantra, continued their journey. After traveling the whole day, they reached the bank of the Ganga and decided to spend the night there. They sat under a tree. There lived nearby a hunter chief called Guha. He felt sad about the happenings. He told Ram, "Stay with me here, please. My kingdom, my riches, and my life are all at your service." Ram was touched by his friendship. He said, "Dear brother, I know how deep is the love you have for me, but I have promised Kaikeyi that I would live a hermit's life in the forest. We shall live on roots and fruits." They slept under a tree that night. Lakshman and Guha kept watched throughout. The next morning, the three took leave of Guha and got into the boat. Sumantra came to Ram with a heavy heart. Ram said, "Go back to Ayodhya and console my father." As Ram's boat sailed away, Sumantra and Guha looked on with tears in their eyes. After 3 days, Sumantra returned with a heavy heart to Ayodhya and went straight to Dashrat. There he found the king more dead than alive. He bent his head in silence, and Dashrat understood. "Oh Ram," he cried in pain. That very night, Dashrat died of a broken heart. His body was preserved in oil. Vashishta sent messenger to Kaikeyi to bring Bharat and Shatrughna back. They were instructed not to give any indication of what had happened. Bharat immediately returned with Shatrughna. As he entered the city, he saw bad omens. He found the city strangely silent. When he came to Dashrath's palace, he found it empty. He then hurried to Kaikeyi. When he saw her face, sad and pale, he knew something was wrong. "Where's father?" he cried. She said, "My son, he has gone to abode with the gods." "Dead?" Bharat was stunned by the news. "But father is dead? How? Why? When? Why did they not send for me earlier?" He cried aloud in a fit of grief. He asked, "Where is Ram?" He was at least lucky to be with father and hear his last words. "Did my father leave any message for me?" "His last words were Ram," replied Kaikeyi. Bharat was surprised. "Was he not there when the king died?" he asked. She replied, "My son, Ram has been banished to the forest for 14 years, and she told him the whole story. Bharat could not believe his ears. He understood everything and realized the disaster caused by his mother. Bharat looked at her in shame and anger. Kaikeyi now knew how great her mistake was. She begged Bharat to understand her, but nothing could stop Bharat's rage. He said angrily, "You are my enemy, not my mother. Oh, you heartless woman! You have killed my father. You have banished my brother. Did you not know how much I love Ram? I do not wish to have anything to do with you, and I am no longer your son." So saying, he rushed to Kaushalya's apartment. Kaushalya and Sumitra welcomed him. Kaushalya, full of sorrow, spoke in a low voice. "Bharat, the kingdom is waiting for you. You need not fear any opposition from us. All that we request you to do is to take me and Sumitra to the forest to live with Ram." Tears trickled down Bharat's face as he heard her. He fell at the feet of Kaushalya and clasping them with both his hands cried sobbing, "Oh, mother, you know my love for Ram. Is it right for you to say these words? I can never accept the crown that belongs to Ram." He promised her that he would bring Ram back to Ayodhya. Day and night Bharat thought of Ram and how to bring him back. He knew no peace. He asked Vashishta for advice. Vashishta told him that the funeral rites of Dashrat could not be delayed. Arrangements were made with the permission of Bharat for the cremation of the body. Holy men chanted the funeral hymns and Bharat lighted the pyre with appropriate rituals. When the rites were completed, Bharat made up his mind to go in search of Ram. He left Ayodhya with a large army and entered the forest. Kaikeyi and other queens also followed him. After many days, they reached Chitrakoot. Halting the army at a distance, Bharat went to meet Ram. He fell at Ram's feet, sobbing. Ram embraced Bharat and kissed him on the head and said, "Why did you leave our father and come to the forest? Why have you grown so thin?" Bharat could not answer. Again Ram asked him many questions, but Bharat remained silent and started weeping. After an interval, gaining strength, Bharat replied, "Brother, our father has gone to heaven soon after you left. Come back with me, wear the crown, and accept the kingdom." When Ram heard that his father was dead, he swooned. Sita sprinkled water on his face and helped him recover. After some time he rose, and they all went to the river Mandakini to offer prayers for his departed father. Next day Bharat repeated repeatedly begged Ram to return to Ayodhya, but Ram firmly replied, I will not disobey my father at any cost. You go back and rule the kingdom, and I, for my part, shall carry out my pledge and come back after 14 years. But Bharat could not be turned away so easily. At last, Vashishta found a solution. He said, O Bharat, rule the kingdom with Ram's authority and as his deputy. Bharat knew he had to be content with that, but he could not think of sitting on the throne that rightfully belonged to Ram. Dear Ram, he said, I see that I must obey you, but let me take back something that belongs to you. Ram gracefully agreed. Bharat then took his brother's sandals and carried them back to Ayodhya on his head with great reverence. He placed the sandals on the throne and ruled the kingdom in Ram's name, staying in a little hut and counting the days of Ram's return. When Bharat left, Chitrakoot lost all its former attraction for Ram. The trio left Chitrakoot and spent the next few years wandering through the great forest, visiting the holy man on the way. Sage Agastya advised Ram to settle at Panchavati on the banks of the river Godavari. On reaching Panchavati, Lakshman built an elegant hut. They lived happily there. One day Ravan's sister, the demon king, his sister Surpankha saw Ram and, struck by his beauty, fell in love with him. She approached him and said, I am Surpankha, the sister of Ravan, the king of the Rakshasas. Two of my brothers, Kar and Dushan, are the lords of Janasthan, not far from here. I long to marry you. Do not worry about this girl. I shall eat her up immediately. Ram was too amused to be angry with her. Smilingly, he said, As you see, I am already married, but my brother Lakshman here has not got his wife with him. He's young and handsome. Approach him, O fair lady. Surpankha took Ram's word seriously and approached Lakshman. Lakshman understood the joke. He said, Ram is my master, I am his slave. It is not proper that you should become a slave of a slave. Surpankha again went to Ram, but this time with flaming eyes. She said, You are humiliating me in the presence of this woman. I will now devour her before your eyes. So saying, she pounced upon Sita like a wild animal. But Lakshman swiftly intervened and cut off her nose. Surpankha, crying with pain, ran away into the forest to seek the help of her brother Kar. In a short time she returned with 14 Rakshas to attack Ram, but they were killed by Ram in no time. Kar, red with anger, ordered 14,000 of his army to march against Ram with all their chariots and horses and elephants. He asked his brother Dushan and other generals to accompany him. Ram decided to face the demons single-handedly. He asked Lakshman to protect Sita. He put on his armor, took the bow and arrows, and destroyed the entire army. A shining arrow pierced the heart of Dushan. Mad with anger at seeing the destruction of Dushan, Kar rushed against Ram. He turned his chariot and drove against Ram. Even before Ram was aware, he discharged a sharp arrow and cut Ram's bow into two. Ram was surprised. Before he could take up another bow, 7 more arrows came from Kar and broke his armor to pieces. His body was now exposed. Kar took advantage of this and sent arrow after arrow, which hurt Ram in different parts of the body. But fearless, Ram took the great bow given by Agastya and discharged 13 arrows in quick succession, which killed the demon. The battle had lasted an hour and a quarter. Sita and Lakshman were thrilled to see Ram's valor. Sita ran to him and embraced him with tears of joy in her eyes. Surpankha was terror-stricken and flew to Lanka to see the protection of Ravan. Ravan was shocked to see his sister disfigured. He asked her for the cause. Surpankha narrated how Kar and Dushan and their whole army had been destroyed. Brother, she said, I was all anxious to get the beautiful Sita for you, but your brothers were killed in the attempt. The best way of punishing Ram is to carry away Sita to Lanka, kidnap her, and Ram would then die of grief, as he would never know the whereabouts of Sita. Quick as lightning, Ravan thought of a plan that would avenge the insult his sister had suffered, and at the same time get the lovely Sita for himself. He set out in his plane known as Pushpak. First he went to Marich and sought his help to abduct Sita. When Marich heard Ram's name, he trembled, for how could he forget the death of his mother Tadka at Ram's hands? He stared at Ravan in horror. "You have been misled by Ram," he said. "Years ago I used to torment Vishwamitra. At that time Ram came here, and do you know what he did? With one arrow he killed Subahu, and with another he hurled me far into the sea. He was a mere boy then. Now he's grown up and strong. Do not plan your own ruin, and do not, I pray, have any thoughts of Sita. She is chastity personified. Her anger alone will reduce you to ashes." But Ravan refused to heed Marich's advice. "I have come here to seek your help and not your advice. Now take your choice. Help me in my plan or prepare for your death." Marich knew that his end was near. He thought for a while and then said, "I would rather be killed by Ram than be by you." So saying, he got ready for the wicked trick that Ravan had planned. Sita was gathering flowers near her cottage when the golden deer flashed past. Sita was spellbound. "Do come and look," she cried, eager that Ram and Lakshman should see the beautiful deer. They came out looking in all directions. Sita, pointing to the animal, cried with delight, "Look, I've never seen such a beautiful deer in my life. Can you get it for me? I will make it my pet." "It is a wonderful creature," said Ram. "Lakshman, we can catch it, as Sita is so delighted with it and wants it." Lakshman grew suspicious. He said, "This is not an animal. It seems that demons are playing tricks on us." But Ram said, "If this deer is a real animal, I shall get it for Sita. But if it is a demon, I shall kill him. Have no fear, but look after Sita. Take care and don't leave her, whatever happens." With these words, Ram started out in pursuit of the golden deer. The golden deer was none other than Marich. It ran swiftly into the deep forest and Ram followed it. At last, when Ram found it not possible to catch it alive, he killed it with a sharp arrow. As Ram's arrow pierced his heart, Marich knew he was going to die. He cried, "Oh, Sita! Oh, Lakshman! Help! Help!" in a voice resembling Ram's, and fell down dead. Sita was thunderstruck. It was her husband's voice. She said to Lakshman, "Do you not hear your brother's voice? Probably he's surrounded by demons and needs your help. Go at once to his help." But Lakshman was calm and unmoved. "Don't be alarmed, O princess," he replied. "It is all the tricks of demons. Ram would never cry like that." But Sita would not listen. She forced Lakshman to go. At last he left her reluctantly with a warning. "I shall draw a line. Don't cross this line for any reason. You will be safe as long as you stay within the circle. May the gods protect you." And with the tip of his arrow, Lakshman drew a line around the hut and went inside to the forest in search of Ram. Ravan saw that his trick had worked. Sita was alone. He disguised himself as a hermit, complete with wooden sandal, staff, and water pot. Clothed in ochre garment, he approached the hermitage, chanting the Vedas. Wondering at the strange voice, Sita came out of the hut. Seeing a holy man, she brought some food and offered it to him, standing within the line drawn by Lakshman. "Come nearer to make the offering, daughter," said Ravan, still standing where he was. "Oh, but I can't," said Sita. "I'm not permitted to cross this line." "In that case, I don't need your alms." With these words, Ravan began to walk away. Sita felt ashamed at failing to entertain a holy man, and before she quite realized what she was doing, she had stepped outside the magic line and was calling after Ravan. Immediately, Ravan pounced on her and seized her hands. He thundered, "I am Ravan, the king of Lanka. Come to Lanka and be my queen. There will be 5,000 slaves at your service. Leave this beggar Ram and follow me." Saying so, he dragged her to his chariot, which flew off into the sky. Meanwhile, Ram was hurrying back to the hut in great anxiety. He was surprised to see Lakshman on the way coming in search of him. "Ah, Lakshman, why have you left Sita alone?" cried Ram. Lakshman related the painful circumstances in which he was forced to leave the hermitage. As he listened, Ram knew that a grave danger was in store for Sita. They hurried to the hut and found it empty. Even as they feared, they ran from place to place, from tree to tree, from bush to bush. They searched, shouted, and called out her name. All in vain. Ram became desperate and began to question every tree, every beast and bird that he came across. At last he sat down, exhausted, on a seat of stones and told Lakshman that he would never leave the forest. He would die where his Sita had died. Lakshman tried to console him as best as he could. A little later, they again started in search of Sita. Jatayu, the king of eagles, was sitting on a tree when Ravan was carrying away Sita. He was a close friend of Dashrat. Hearing Sita's cry for help, he flew and fought with Ravan to free Sita. Ravan attacked Jatayu, the king of eagles. He shot arrows at the bird, but disregarding them, Jatayu fought on with his beak and talons. The battle was fierce. At last, Ravan cut off the wings of the bird with his sword. Jatayu was helpless. Unable to move, he fell on the ground. Ram and Lakshman, while searching for Sita, came to the place where Jatayu was laying wounded. Jatayu painfully raised his bleeding head and said, "Oh Ram, Sita has been carried away by Ravan. I tried my best to save her, but the cruel Ravan cut off my wings and flew away with her." Uttering these words, Jatayu spat blood and died. Ram mourned the great sacrifice of Jatayu. Crossing the sea, Ravan entered Lanka, his kingdom. Taking Sita to his palace, he called some maids and ordered them, "Take charge of this fair lady. Give her food or silks or jewels or precious stones that she wants." Sita shrank from them like a deer from a pack of hounds. To impress her with his wealth and power, Ravan forcefully took her around his palace and showed her all his glory. He took her to his pleasure garden, but nothing could win her mind. He said at last, "Look here, I will give you a full year. Think over what I've said. Accept me as your husband. If at the end of this period you remain stubborn, I shall command my servants to cut you to pieces and serve the meat for my breakfast." He ordered his servants to keep her in the Ashokavati, the gardens, to guard her carefully. The next day, the princess traveled towards the hermitage of Sabri on the banks of Lake Pampa. Earlier, sage Matang with his disciples performed austerities in that hermitage. Sabri had served them devotedly. When they departed from the earth, they instructed her to wait for Ram and serve him. By this, she would attain the heavenly abode. Accordingly, this noble woman had waited for 2 years, living alone. She was always storing choice good nuts, fruits, and honey to offer Ram and Lakshman. When they went, she immediately recognized that they were her long-expected guests and fell at their feet. She took them inside, washed their feet, and offered them bor, the berries that she had gathered. Ram was moved by her devotion. He gently held the old woman's hand and shed tears of joy. He said, "O Sabri, I'm sure your service to sages and your austerities have secured you a place in heaven." "Yes, my lord, today I have seen you. I waited on this earth only to serve you. Give me permission to depart." She showed them around the lake and hermitage. The princes bowed and left the hermitage. Ram and Lakshman walked on until they came to the lovely hill of Rishamukh. While they were thus going on their way to the mountain Rishamukh to meet Sugriv, Sugriv himself saw them from the mountain heights and mistakenly he thought they were the agents of his dreaded elder brother Vali. He fled away to more unapproachable heights. Sugriv was driven out of his kingdom by Vali and had to live in constant fear of him. Earlier, Vali was king of Kishkanda. Kishkinda, and Sugriv assisted him. During that time, a demon named Mayavi came to the gates of Kishkinda and challenged Vali to fight. Vali and Sugriv rushed out to fight. When Mayavi saw both of them coming, he fled away in fear. They saw him entering a cave. Vali entered the cave, asking Sugriv to wait at the mouth of the cave. Sugriv waited at the entrance. He heard sounds of a struggle inside and he confused yells of Vali. A stream of blood gushed out from the cave, and Sugriv thought that Vali had been overpowered and killed. To prevent the demon from coming out of the cave, he blocked the mouth of the cave with a huge rock. He was in great grief. Since a country cannot be without a king, the ministries persuaded Sugriv to ascend the throne. After a few days, suddenly Vali appeared. After killing the giant, he had kicked away the boulder and returned. He thought that Sugriv had treacherously sealed the den and seized the kingdom during his absence. He drove Sugriv out of the kingdom and took the Rishamukh hill, which was out of bounds for Vali because of a rishi's curse. On seeing Ram and Lakshman, Sugriv sent Hanuman, his trusted friend, to know who the strangers were and why they had come. Hanuman assumed the guise of a young ascetic and came to Ram and Lakshman. He asked them who they were and why they were wandering in the forest. The brothers told him about themselves and said they were glad to meet the messenger of Sugriv, the very person they were in search of, as a friend and ally. Pleased with their words, Hanuman took off his disguise and, assuming his original form, carried the brothers on his shoulders to Sugriv. Hanuman narrated Sugriv their story and told him how they had come to seek his alliance. Sugriv tore off a big branch from a tree. The friends sat on it and began to shave each other's sorrows. Hanuman then kindled a fire to bear witness to the alliance they were making. Ram and Sugriv solemnly went around the fire, hand in hand, saying, "Hereafter your sorrow is my sorrow, and your joy is my joy." Sugriv appealed to Ram. "I am hiding on this hill, fearing Vali. Will you kill Vali and restore my wife to me?" Ram assured him that he would do so. Sugriv was not sure of Ram's strength. He said to Ram, "Sir, look at those gigantic sala trees standing in a row. Vali once discharged series of arrows. Each arrow penetrated the trunk of a tree and came out on the other side. Such is the strength of my brother. I do not know how you can win him." Ram rose from his seat, saying, "I think, Sugriv, I must first create faith in you." He went near the sala trees and discharged an arrow, which went straight through the trunks of 7 of them, standing in a row, and fell on the other side, and buried itself deep in the ground. Sugriv was filled with amazement. They all proceeded to Kishkinda, the capital of Vali. In few hours, they reached the outskirts of the city. The arrangement was that Sugriv should make his appearance at the city gate and challenge Vali to fight, while Ram and others would hide behind. So Sugriv went up and gave a terrific roar. Vali came out and began to fight with Sugriv. Ram was watching the duel from a distance. He was puzzled to see the brothers resembled each other very closely. It became impossible for him to identify Sugriv. Hence he looked on helplessly as Sugriv received thunderous blows from his brother. At last Sugriv ran away, yelling and bleeding. Vali turned back to his capital triumphant. When Ram and Lakshman came to Sugriv, he spoke in an aggravated tone. "If you had told me the truth that you would not kill Vali, I would not have challenged him to fight and got beaten almost to death." Ram pacified him. He said, "Both of you looked so alike. It would have been disastrous if I had killed you by mistake. Again challenge Vali. This time wear a garland around your neck so that I could recognize you, and I surely will kill him." So they went to Kishkinda again. Sugriv approached the city gate and roared as before, while the rest remained hidden. Now Vali rose in great anger and vowed that he would not let Sugriv escape from his hand. He would mercilessly kill him this time. But his wife Tara sensed danger and tried to restrain him. She said, "Your brother who was beaten up yesterday would not come and challenge you again if he were not sure of some strong help from others. Moreover, I hear from our son Angad that 2 princes have come to help Sugriv." Vali was impatient. He said, "What are you saying, Tara? Don't stand in my way. This is between me and Sugriv, and nobody else should interfere." Vali came out roaring like a lion. The brothers dashed against each other and fought hand to hand, sometimes rolling on the ground in deadly grip, sometimes flying into the air, tearing at each other. Sometimes they separated only to break the branches of a nearby tree. Anticipating Ram's help, Sugriv kept up an equal fight. For long, Ram was watching the valor of Vali. He then sent a sharp arrow which whizzed in the air and went straight to the heart of Vali. Vali fell mortally wounded. Ram with his companions came near Vali, struggling with death. Vali began to taunt Ram for his cowardly act. He asked, "Ram, is this your dharma to kill one who is engaged in fighting another? You are not fit to be a king. You had wanted help against Ravan. You could have asked me. I would have brought him hand and foot bound and delivered him to you. I am sorry for your action." Ram said, "Vali, you are not fit to talk of dharma. True dharma requires that you should treat your younger brother as your son and his wife as your daughter. Instead, you have taken Sugriv's wife. It is to maintain dharma that I had to kill you." Vali at last saw the error of his ways and commanded his wife and son to take care of Ram. He called Sugriv to his side and said, "Sugriv, hereafter you will rule the kingdom. Look upon Angad as your son. Take this golden chain from my neck as my last gift to you, as this was given to me by Lord Indra." Sugriv was again crowned king. He was so grateful to Ram that he swore to be his friend and ally for the rest of his life. It was rainy season, so they had to wait for their next step. When the rain ceased, Lakshman reminded Sugriv of his vow. Sugriv immediately called his general Nila and said, "We have to search all over the world for Sita. Order all of our powerful armies to assemble immediately." The monkey armies came and occupied the entire region round the cave of the princess as far as the eye could see. They were in large numbers, that they resembled a cloud of locusts. Sugriv surveyed them and said to Ram, "Our entire army, O prince, is at your command. You can now give any order you like to test the sincerity of Sugriv." Ram embraced him in joy and said, "We should first-hand find out where Sita is. You are the king, so you give orders to your army to search Sita." Accordingly, Sugriv sent efficient generals with their armies in different directions to search Sita. Lastly, he called Hanuman and said, "There is none to equal you, O Hanuman, in strength, valor, swiftness, discrimination, and wisdom. I have great hopes in you. You succeed where others fail. I rely on you to discover the whereabouts of Sita." When Ram saw what great confidence Sugriv had in Hanuman, of whose powers he himself had formed a very high opinion, he gave Hanuman his signet ring and said, "Take this ring. I am full of hope that you will find Sita. By this token she will, without fear or suspicion, recognize that you have come from me." Hanuman bent low, touched the feet of Ram, and taking the ring from his hand, placed it reverently on his head before securing it. Hanuman, Angad, Jambuvan, and other heroes traveled southwards. Within the allotted time of 30 days, all the expeditions returned home except Hanuman. Those who returned reported that they had searched all possible hiding places in the various lands they visited, but could not find any traces of Sita. The next problem to them was who among them would leap across the sea to reach Lanka. Angad asked everyone this question and got varied answers. He himself said he could jump and land in Lanka, but he would not be able to recross the sea. Hanuman was sitting silently. "Why are you so quiet, my friend?" asked Jambuvan. "Your strength, courage, and wisdom are well known. You can fly like Garud. There is none equal to you. Arise, O Hanuman, come forward and put hope and courage into our hearts." When Hanuman was thus reminded of his strength, his form began to grow, and he was almost touching the sky. He climbed onto the Mahendra mountain. There was a roar and shake when he took off from the mountain at full speed. The eager faces of the army watched him as he disappeared behind the clouds. Flying was a secret which Hanuman had learned from his father, Vayu, the god of the winds. As he was traveling, suddenly he felt himself being dragged toward the sea by a great force. He looked down and saw a huge demoness pulling him down. She opened her mouth to swallow him. At once he entered her mouth, but then he ripped his way out through her stomach. The demoness died and sank into the sea. He continued his journey. Thus, after overcoming many more obstacles, Hanuman reached Lanka. He contracted his body and alighted as a tiny monkey. Suddenly, he was confronted by a demoness with fierce eyes. She asked, "Who are you? Where are you going?" Undaunted, Hanuman replied, "I asked you the same question. Who are you to obstruct my way?" "I am the guardian of Lanka," she said. "You cannot enter the city while I am here." She struck Hanuman on his head with her palm. Hanuman yelled with pain, but recovering himself in a moment, pounced on her and dealt her a powerful blow. Hanuman then cautiously entered the city and went along the main street. He searched chamber after chamber, but Sita could be found. As he wandered, he came to a wonderful garden called Ashokvati or Ashokvan. The cool breeze and delicious fruits of the garden invited him to rest. "I am very tired," he said himself. "I shall rest here for a while and enjoy the fruits here." Suddenly he saw something shining under a tree. When he looked closer, he found a very beautiful woman sitting there. She was guarded by hideous demonesses. She was thin and skinny, with no ornaments, disheveled hair, and absolutely careless about her appearance. To Hanuman, she appeared like a raging fire. When she raised her face to heaven, wet with tears, as if praying for relief, his heart melted in pity. Lifting him for a moment above the plane of mortal beings, gazing at her, Hanuman felt he grew divine. This experience profoundly created an impression upon him. Suddenly he became an immortal, as it were. He instinctively felt that this was the Sita he was in search of. Just then Ravana entered the garden. He approached Sita and said, "O fair lady, why do you shrink from me? Accept me and become the empress of this great land. You have waited all these months in vain hope. You may wait till the end of your life. Ram will not be able to cross the ocean and come to this beautiful city. Even the gods dare not approach it." Ravan was very, very curious of what Sita's answer was going to be. As Sita refused again, Ravan was furious. He thundered, "What? Me begging to that insignificant human? I see that the more I try to concede you, the more you insult me." As soon as Ravan left, the demonesses surrounded Sita again. One of them said, "Enjoy the riches of Lanka by accepting Ravan, or he's going to kill you." Meanwhile, Hanuman, who had been witnessing the happenings from the tree, thought to himself, "How can I convince her that I am Ram's messenger? If I suddenly appear before her, she'll think that it is another one of Ravan's tricks." He hit upon a plan and began to recite Ram's story in a sweet and gentle voice. Sita was astonished to hear about Ram. She looked up and saw a small monkey perched on a tree. Then Hanuman slowly came close to her. "O mother, from your sorrow and tears I take you to be a princess. Are you Sita whom I am searching?" "Yes, I'm Sita. You seem to know my husband. May I know who you are?" "I am the messenger of Ram. I am called Hanuman. I have come here in the command of Ram." The words of Hanuman sent a thrill of joy through the heart of Sita. She suspected that the monkey might be Ravan in disguise. She closed her eyes. Hanuman tried different ways to assure her. He gave a long and eloquent description of the prince. He said, "O mother, I shall return and inform Ram about you and bring him immediately. He will release you from this bondage. But why should you suffer any longer?" As he put Ram's ring into her hand, Sita wondered how a little monkey could carry her across the ocean. To dispel her doubts, Hanuman began to magnify his form before her. She gazed at him with wonder and said, "O Hanuman, I do not doubt your strength, but it is not right that you should carry me. On the way, the demons may attack you with deadly weapons. Besides, if you take me away, it will bring no credit to Ram. So let Ram come like warrior and kill Ravan and then take me." While going out of the garden, Hanuman thought within himself, "What can I do to instill courage in Sita and fear in Ravan?" The warriors came running to catch Hanuman as he was going. He ordered 5 commanders to go with a big army and capture the monkey, but Hanuman pelted them with boulders. Ravan called his son Indrajit and said, "You are a great warrior. Even the gods tremble at the mention of your name. Go now and fight that monkey." Indrajit bowed and marched to the garden. But Hanuman rose in the sky and moved away swiftly. Hanuman also knew that if he had wished, he could have broken Indrajit and he didn't have to get captured by Indrajit. But Hanuman had a better plan, so he allowed himself to be captured by ropes. Hanuman was taken to the court and brought in front of Ravan. Ravan commanded his ministers to question Hanuman. "I will now go back and give this information to Ram," Hanuman said. "What will he do next? I don't know, but I advise you to restore Sita to him and ask him for forgiveness." Ravan was wild with rage. He ordered that Hanuman should be put to death at once, but Vibhishan, his younger brother, who was a devotee of Ram, intervened. Ravan ordered Hanuman's tail to be set on fire. The demons led Hanuman out of the hall, wrapped old rags around his tail, soaked it in oil, and set fire to it. He was paraded through the streets of Lanka. A big mob followed his procession. Hanuman and dancing in joy. Sita was informed that this is what was being done to Hanuman. Sita prayed, "O Agni, may he feel no heat at all. Be cool to him." So the fire never hurt Hanuman. Instead, as Hanuman was being paraded through the city of Lanka, he suddenly flew into the sky and started fire on all the buildings. A strong wind began to blow and the flames spread through the entire city. Seeing the whole city was burning, Hanuman was satisfied, so he ran to the sea and drenched his tail in the water. Suddenly, he had a painful doubt. Had the fire destroyed Sita too? What tragedy would that be? So he went back to the garden and found Sita calmly sitting under a tree. "Mother, I see you safe and sound. Now give me your leave so that I can go and inform Ram of your whereabouts." Sugriv, Lakshman, and Vibhishan together discuss how they should cross the sea once they learned from Hanuman where Sita was. For 3 days, Ram prayed to Varun, the god of the ocean, for a passage. Since there was no response, Ram was enraged and he took up the Brahmastra in his hand and was about to hurl it on the ocean. Immediately, Varun came out of the water. He said, "Oh Ram, how can I give up my nature of being fierce, deep, and unconquerable? It is not possible to part the waters and provide a dry passage. Instead, I'm willing to help you in another way. Let the monkeys build a bridge with the help of boulders and trees. I shall see that no creatures of mine, whale or shark or crocodile, shall harm your army when it crosses the sea. I too shall help you to build the bridge." So thousands of monkeys, squirrels, and all creatures set about the task of building the bridge with great enthusiasm. The entire monkey force worked hard and completed the bridge in just 5 days. The army crossed over to Lanka using the bridge. Every rock that was placed on the bridge had Ram's name, as every rock, as heavy as it was, floated to let the bridge be strong. Ravan thought if somehow Sita should be made to yield to him, and he tried all sorts of tricks and magics. He tried black magic, but Sita did not surrender to him. Ram ordered the monkey army to attack. They rushed forward and hurled huge boulders against the city walls of Lanka. The demons came out and attacked the monkey. Meanwhile, the ocean and the air were churned by a mighty wind, and celestial eagle burst into view. The monkeys looked at the sky and saw the eagle coming down, flapping his wings. At the sight of the eagle, the serpents binding the brothers fled. The eagle passed his wings over the bodies of Ram and Lakshman. Immediately all of their wounds were healed and their strength returned. They rose refreshed as if from a long sleep. The eagle humbly said, I am Garud, the king of birds, and at my sight all serpents move away, and at my touch all poison neutralizes. Lakshman fought heroically, but Ravan grasped a mighty missile called Sakti, which Brahma had bestowed on him. He hurled it with all his might against Lakshman. It came like a thunderbolt and struck Lakshman on the chest. Lakshman fell down unconscious. Hanuman carried him away to Ram and revived him. Then he pounced on Ravan and gave him such a blow with his fist that blood came out through his mouth and nose. Ram now came into the field. Ravan could not stand the fierce onslaught of Ravan, because he was sorely wounded. His bow fell from his hand, his chariot was smashed. Deprived of everything, he stood helpless before Ram. Ram took pity on him and said, You may go and rest now. You have fought creditably today. I give you leave. Take rest and come back tomorrow in another chariot with fresh weapons. Ravan was ashamed, and as there was no other course left for him, he beat a hasty retreat. His pride was humbled. He sat on his palace, dejected. Suddenly a thought struck him. He ordered Kumbhakarna, his brother, to be aroused from his long sleep. The generals prodded Kumbhakarna with sharp instruments, and goaded tuskers butted him, but to no response. Then they placed beside him huge quantities of delicious food, and that fragrance woke him up. On hearing this, Kumbhakarna rolled his eyes in anger that Ram was fighting with Ravan and was beating him. What is this true? I will go first and kill them, Ram and Lakshman. Then you see my brother. Kumbhakarna agreed and marched into the presence of Ravan. Ravan, glad to see his brother, got down from his throne and embraced him. They attacked Ram and Ravan with uprooted trees and threw several boulders, but these missiles struck the giant's body and fell to pieces. Could no more the monkeys stand before Kumbhakarna? They fled in all directions to save their lives. But Hanuman brought them back. They marched against Kumbhakarna and once more hurled their weapons on his body. A jagged rock from Hanuman's hand struck Kumbhakarna on his breast, and he began to bleed, but unheedingly struck Hanuman with a lance, who fell down sprouting blood. Later he rushed towards Ram, ignoring the attacks of Lakshman and others. A terrible duel followed between Ram and Kumbhakarna. In the end, Ram used one of his divine weapons to kill Kumbhakarna. When Ravan heard of the death of his brother Kumbhakarna, he was furious and devastated. Seeing him so devastated, Indrajit, the son of Ravan, tried to console him. He said, Why are you so sad and anxious? You may take Ram and Lakshman as already dead. You should not give way to despair as long as I am alive. I will go to battlefield. During the fight, he flew in the air and became invincible. From nowhere came an incessant rain of arrows on the monkeys below. They made a desperate attempt to fight back, but were powerless. Lakshman lay unconscious as one of the arrows struck him. Jambuvan, the great veteran of the monkeys, called Vibhishan and asked him to bring Hanuman. Vibhishan required, Why are you thinking of Hanuman instead of Ram and Lakshman? I am thinking of him, Jambuvan said, because if he is alive, it does not matter even if all others have fallen. But if he is dead, we're as good as dead, and we may give up all hope. Hanuman was deeply moved. Come here, my hero, Jambuvan said. You alone can save Ram and Lakshman and the army. Go immediately to Sanjivani Parvat, the hill of the herbs between Rishabh and Kailash peaks in the Himalayas. There you will find 4 wonderful herbs which glow in darkness. They have marvelous healing powers. Hanuman rose in the sky and straight as an arrow made for the Himalayas. Finding someone looking for them, the herbs disappeared from sight. Hanuman was not the one who could be defeated in his purpose, so he uprooted the entire peak of the mountains, with all the herbs growing there from the mountain, and returned to Lanka. At the very smell of the herbs, Ram, Lakshman, and other fallen monkeys leapt to life with their wounds healed. The battle resumed. The monkeys entered the city and set it on fire. With the fall of Indrajit, as Ram had killed him, Ravan was shattered. He wailed most piteously. His sorrow turned into anger. One by one, his eyes became red with fury against Ram. He started with the battlefield with the surviving chiefs, forcing his way past Lakshman. Ram came face to face with Ravan. Both were great experts in the wielding of the bow, and both had the knowledge of celestial weapons. Therefore, the fight was long and equal. One by one, Ram cut off Ravan's 10 heads with his arrows, but no sooner was one head cut off than the other grew to take its place. Matali, the charioteer of Ram, who was sent by Indra with his chariot, whispered in Ram's ear, "May I remind you of the Brahmastra?" Ram took Brahmastra in his hand, which was the divine weapon, repeated the mantra, and gave it higher power, and hurled it with all its might against Ravan. The Brahmastra whizzed through the air, emitting flame. It pierced the belly button of Ravan. Ravan fell from his chariot, dead. The demons could scarcely believe their eyes. The end was so sudden. After Ravan's death, Vibhishan was duly crowned the king of Lanka. The message of Ram's victory was sent to Sita. After a bath and adorned with jewels, Sita was taken in palanquin before Ram. Thousands of monkeys surged forward to get a glimpse of Sita. Sita got down from the palanquin and walked a little distance so that none was denied the privilege of seeing her. At last Sita reached her husband. Meeting him after a long time, she was overcome by joyous emotions. But Ram seemed to be lost in thought. At length he spoke. "I have killed my enemy. I have done my duty as a true king. But you have lived here for a year in the enemy's abode. It is not proper that I should take you back now." Sita was shocked. "You have broken my heart," she said. "Only the uncultured speak like this. Have you forgotten the noble family I come from? Is it my fault that the monster carried me off by force? All the time my mind, my heart, and soul were fixed on you and you alone, my lord." She turned to Lakshman and said with tears streaming from her eyes, "Prepare a fire for me. That is the only remedy for this sorrow of mine." Lakshman, in suppressed anger, looked at Ram's face, but no sign of softening. He lighted a big fire. Sita reverently went around her husband and approached the blazing fire. Joining her palms in salutation, she said, "If I am pure, O fire, protect me." With these words, she jumped into the flames, and to the horror of the monkeys, who stood on all sides watching the tragic sight, then arose from out of the flames Agni, the fire god whom she had invoked. He lifted Sita from the flames unharmed and presented her to Ram. "Don't I know that she's spotless and pure at heart?" cried Ram, standing up to receive her. "It is for the sake of the world that I made her go through this ordeal of fire, so that the truth may be known to all." Ram and Sita, now reunited, ascended the plain called Pushpak along with monkey friends and Vibhishan. Hanuman went in advance to inform Bharat of their arrival. As they flew in the sky, Ram pointed out to Sita the spots where he and Lakshman had wandered in the forest in search of her. When Bharat saw Ram at a distance, a joyous cry went up. Bharat was overjoyed to see Ram, Sita, and Lakshman all together. They all returned to Ayodhya. The city eagerly waited to receive them. Ram was crowned king and took up the reins of the government, much to the joy of their people. And Ram and Sita lived happily ever after.